How's it going, everyone? Tommy here from Coaching 101. In this presentation, what I want to actually take people through is a little bit of a plan or skeleton for when people get back into the gyms. So I've got my laptop on point and I just wanted to talk through a couple of maybe bullet points as we go through 5 things to consider when returning to training or the gym post-lockdown. Now, the first point I actually wanted to touch upon is mobility and full range of motion. So since we've been in and out of lockdown for maybe the past year, some of us have had the good opportunity to maybe train at home, but more than likely this has been with minimal equipment. When we get back inside the gyms, there's going to be equipment such as dumbbells, barbells. A lot of people have been using kettlebells or might not have. There's going to be a lot of machinery that our body hasn't been used to over the past couple of months. So with mobility and full range of motion, the aim is to try and reintroduce the body to these ranges of motion that we've pretty much been out of our lives for the past 12 months. With a little time exposed when we were back inside the gyms, but since around Christmas time, maybe January now, most of us haven't had this opportunity. So when you're re-entering the gym and you're using equipment such as dumbbells and barbells, make sure you're taking your time and develop the skill to reintroduce the body back to these movements. Full range of motion is what's going to be key of trying to stay as far away from injury as possible. Obviously, full range of motion is within context to people. But over the past couple of months, our muscles, joints, tendons, ligaments haven't really been through full ranges of motion. As I say, some people have had the opportunity to do so, but most of us haven't. So 100% when we get back inside the gyms, our tendons, ligaments, muscles, joints are going to be a little bit creaky. I always use the analogy of if you put a nail in a painting or a picture and you leave it for a couple of years and don't really give it that TLC it's needed, then more than likely it's going to be a little bit more tougher to deal with when you come to take that out and replace it with a new one. Use that analogy from when we've been in lockdown to now going back inside of the gyms. Our joints, muscles, tendons, ligaments are going to be a little bit creaky, a little bit rusty. So it's going to take a little bit of a while to open them up again. So focus on mobility and full range of motion training is probably what's going to be key at getting back to that 100% level. Point number 2 is a reduction in training load. Now again, some of us have had the opportunity to be exposed to plates, dumbbells, barbells at home. But for the majority, it's either been one kettlebell, one dumbbell, or maybe none of that at all. Maybe just been sticking to something as accessible as running or cycling or even walking. So a reduction in training load is when we go back to the gyms, probably lower your expectations of where you are going to be at in terms of what you were before. More than likely, there is a bit of a scientific term called the detraining effect. But if we train for a certain period of time, and then for a certain period of time we don't train or don't perform the movements that we have been doing on a consistent basis, there will be a little bit of a reverse effect or detraining effect where our body won't have adapted to the new movements because we haven't been performing them and the new loads. Hence a detraining effect where we maybe lose strength, we lose a little bit of conditioning, we maybe even lose a little bit of range of motion as previously talked about in the point before. So that being said, when you do re-enter the gyms, make sure you choose a manageable load when you're first getting into maybe using a barbell or dumbbell, kettlebells, etc. Make sure you're training through its fullest range of motion so you can build strength across a wider range of motion. And the final point to make on that is with a reduction in training load, it doesn't mean that you can't get back to where you were beforehand. If anything, is a little bit of a restart of the process and the training journey to eventually get back to where you were before prior lockdown. This gives us an opportunity maybe rebuild or relearn techniques that we've struggled with in the past, to become stronger than we were before in the past, and to take a period of time to rebuild. So don't look at reduction in training load as a bad thing. Try and look at it from a positive angle and look at where we can go in the future. Point number 3 is a gradual increase in training volume and load. Now this has a little bit of connection to the previous point number 2 where we talked about reduction in training load. If we move back into the gym with the expectations of being where we were beforehand, we're probably going to get a little bit of a shock. Alongside a gradual increase in training load and volume, such a sudden increase after plenty of time off can expose us to a little bit more risk of injury. If we suddenly go from doing 0 to back into the gym maybe 6 to 8 times a week, you've increased your volume on the weights that you haven't been doing for a long period of time, you've increased the intensity or the load, which we haven't been doing over a long period of time. This makes us a little bit more susceptible and a higher percentage of risk to injury. A gradual increase in training volume and load helps us manage and deal with these potential problems. As previously spoken before, a gradual increase in training volume and load allows us to push through some plateaus maybe we've had in the past, relearn and rebuild some techniques, and also keep developing our strength even past the further point where we were in the past. It is not a bad thing to not be where we were before. If we look at gradual increase in training volume and load from a progressive overload perspective, then it fits in the continuum of just gradually increasing training volume very, very slightly or intensity each week as you move on into the training program and being back inside the gyms. As mentioned before, this allows us to manage any external or even internal factors, although still may happen, allows us to maybe mitigate them a little bit better. And going all the way back to point 1, this allows us to gradually increase the training volume and load on the susceptible areas that are a little bit more exposed to injury, such as ligaments, tendons, joints, to gradually increase and gradually handle the loads that we haven't been able to be exposed to for the past couple of months up to a year. This then brings me on to point number 4. Point number 4 states that a higher emphasis on nutrition, sleep and hydration as recovery methods. Now, although this should already be an important factor, the term higher emphasis is used probably because there's going to be a sudden change from maybe being a little bit more sedentary. We haven't done nothing for a long period of time. We're getting back to the point in the gyms where we're starting to train a little bit more, we're starting to load the body a little bit more, whether that would be through load, through conditioning elements such as running and cycling. So we've gone from a period of maybe not needing as much, when I say as much to deal with the load of training in the past, of nutrition, hydration, sleep and recovery, where we might have been able to get away with it for the time being because we're not as active as what we have been in the past due to the gyms being closed. That being said, because there is such a sudden increase and there will be an increase of training load and volume within the upcoming weeks, need to make sure that the external sources outside the training are focused on and are made a priority. This means nutrition is on point. This means sleep is on point. This means hydration is on point. Because as much as we do love training, and in my opinion, training is the easy part, the hard part is all the time spent outside of the gym, trying to make that training worthwhile. Because if we do train, as we know, and external factors such as nutrition, sleep and hydration are pretty poor, then that training is pretty pointless. We won't get the adaptations that we want and that we have placed the body under. So point number 4 is pretty important alongside the others to make them count. And then this brings me to the final point, number 5, which is manage your expectations. We've previously touched on this in point 1, point 2 and point 3, even point 4, where we have come from a period of non-activity. So now we're starting to slowly go into a period of increased activity, increased tasks, increased events around our lives. Manage your expectations within training inside the gym. If you look at going inside the gym now, an example, you come to a lift where you've been pretty solid at in the past, and you might take a little bit of a 30 to 40% deficit and compare it to what we've been in the past. That is okay. The reason it's okay is because, as we mentioned again, we haven't been in the routine of training and within a training environment and using this type of equipment, these training methods, etc. Managing your expectations is probably going to make that journey and process a little bit better and more successful in the long run in terms of adherence. If you get back inside the gym and you think you're going to be at a point where you have been in the past, which some people might be, and that's fine, but the majority aren't going to be. So this may play a little bit of a psychological battle with people to start comparing themselves to the old selves as a point of, oh no, I'm not where I was. When am I ever going to get back to that point? This is pretty pointless. You can see how that sort of thinking can play a big important factor of affecting training in the upcoming future. Now, I'm not saying don't have high expectations of where we're going to be, but definitely give yourself a little bit of time and development to get back to where we were, and if not, even further. And give yourself a little bit of a break when we get back into the gym. When I say break, I mean a little bit of a mental break, and stop being so hard on yourself. It's going to take time to get to where we were, but who's saying that we can't get back to where we were, if not even further? These are the 5 points covered to 5 things to consider when returning to the gym or training. There is a lot more things to think about. These are just a couple of subjects that I actually wanted to touch on today.